Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm going to ask everybody to please grab your seats. If you can please grab your seats. We're about to begin the program. It's so great to see everybody in here this evening. Can everyone hear me okay? You can hear me in the back. Sound check. Excellent. All right. Give everybody a chance to get seated. Wow. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michelle Meyer-Ship, and I'm going to be your MC or Mistress of Ceremonies for the program this evening. And I'd like to say that I'm honored to have the privilege to welcome you on behalf of the Coleman family. I actually had the privilege of clerking for Justice Coleman in 1995, a year following my husband, Judge Michael Shipp. Former Justice Pollock used to say that Justice Coleman ran the love boat. And I'm here to say that that's probably about right, 20-something years later. But again, on behalf of Mrs. Coleman, Kayron, Jimmy, and the rest of the family, we thank you for being here this evening as we continue to honor the memory of our beloved Justice James H. Coleman Jr. He was my role model, my mentor, my coach, my advisor, and more importantly, an extended part of me and Michael's family, and by virtue of that, a part of the family with the entire Coleman family. So I'm really honored to be here, and thank you all for entrusting me in leading tonight's program. So as we get started with the program, I just want to say a few grounding things. Although it's been almost 2 months since Justice Coleman passed away, and about a month, just shy of a month, since we laid him to rest, the weight of his absence is deeply felt still by all of us. And I know this from some of the conversations I've had with some of my co-clerks over the past month or so, and there were about 40 of us. And we're all feeling the loss. Tonight's memorial service is an opportunity for us to come together to reflect upon, celebrate, and pay honor to the incredible life that Justice Coleman lived, his legacy that he leaves behind, and the ways he touched each and every one of us individually, and the way he touched us collectively. As we honor his legacy this evening, let us find strength in each other as we remember not only the sorrow of his passing, but the remarkable impact that his life has left on his family, his immediate family, his extended family, all of us, and the community at large in his work in our New Jersey legal system. And as we get the program started tonight, again, I am really humbled to bring to you some amazing individuals who are going to talk to you and share stories about how he impacted them. They're going to share stories of how he inspired them and how he loved them. So thank you again for being here for this celebration of Justice Coleman's life. And I'm going to invite our first speaker to come up and share a prayer and reflection, Dr. William Howard. Would you join me?
Good evening. Some of you will understand why I say this as I prepare to say a few words. I'm a Baptist preacher, so I wrote something down so I would stay within the time limit. How's that? But with full respect to what must be a diversity of faiths and no faith, I invite you to pray with me or simply observe a brief time of silence. Let us pray. For the grace that flows steadily from the bosom of the author and finisher of our faith, we are grateful. For the life we celebrate in this hour, Justice James H. Coleman, We are grateful for his diligent commitment to justice and fair play, to the law, and his commitment to family and colleagues. We are grateful. We pray that the model of life he has set before us and the strength to stand for that which is right, however unpopular, will be a compelling enticement to us as we live out the rest of our own days. May his soul rest in peace, and in their grief, may his family somehow find strength and solace in the legacy of his example of service. Amen. It was my honor and pleasure to serve with Justice Coleman on the Death Penalty Study Commission of New Jersey. Some of you will remember that it was recommendations from this group that led the legislature and the governor to agree to abolish the death penalty in our state. Judge Coleman was our North Star during our deliberations at the commission. He knew the history, he knew the law, he knew the procedures, and every now and then he reminded us that he knew them. I know I can speak for each member of the commission in saying his clear and steady voice kept us focused on the urgency and the gravity of our task. While he had an easy smile and warm disposition, one always knew you were in the presence of a professional, one who oozed the disposition of a judge. He was an exemplary, if long overdue, first African-American justice on the New Jersey Supreme Court. Now, you see in the program that Judge Coleman was from Lawrenceville, Virginia. If you can find that on a map, let me know. But it's in Brunswick County. And this was the home area, as it turned out, of my wife's beloved grandfather, Deacon Weldon Wright. Brunswick County is the site of many family stories. Both my in-laws attended and worked at Virginia State College in Ettrick, Virginia, near Petersburg, where my wife was born, a preemie. She can't fit in a shoebox now, but they said then she could. She's not here, and don't you tell her I said that. Justice Coleman found, quite accidentally, about these connections, and he seemed fascinated by this, and I have long felt that this might have contributed to the ease of our friendly relations. I visited him one afternoon in his law firm, and he asked me if I would be willing to say a few words at this occasion. Frankly, while I was honored that he would ask, I was just as unsure about how might I respond to this. He looked pretty well at that time. And so I just simply told him, I tell you what, I will do this if you go first, but you have to do me if I do. So that was the agreement, and that explains why this non-lawyer, non-judge, and non-clerk, and non-whatever is here this evening. So that was a great point of humor, but then a couple of months later, it seemed to me, his assistant sent me a voluminous packet of information about his life. including a draft of a then unpublished memoir. And my wife, who is very accustomed to lots of papers around the house, stacks of papers, she said, "What is that?" And I explained I had to hold on to this, and I reported to him it had been received. And this is so much like a good lawyer, isn't it? With an affinity for evidence. This was to say, now, Bill, if you're going to speak for me, you need to know the facts. Knowing a bit of his history and the journey from Brunswick County, Virginia, as a descendant of enslaved Africans, that journey to the lofty court chambers of the great Garden State, it is hard to resist revering his courage, revering his discipline, his determination. And as a son of the Jim Crow South myself, I have a few clues, my friends, of the mask we must wear to be affirmed by a society that is still drunk on the lies of our inferiority, by a society that is yet to embrace fully the humanity of people of African descent, even those like Justice Coleman, whom we know are not inferior by nature. It is within the veil of this milieu that we can just begin to comprehend the justice's reserve and social disposition. And I want to thank the Coleman family for including me in the service of remembrance and celebration. Allow me to express to you and to the justice's many friends and colleagues my solidarity and my compassion as you mourn his passing. We who are Christians, this is also true in other faiths, do not believe physical death is the end. We believe in eternal life and a great reunion. I pray that this will offer some solace to you in these times. God bless you.
Go ahead, Dr. Howard. We see you. You got to give him another round of applause. So now I would like to invite up someone I call Jimmy. Many of you call him Jimmy, but officially James H. Coleman III, to share some reflections about his daddy. Come on, Jimmy.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, so much, and thanks everyone for coming out here tonight. Unlike my father and a lot of the esteemed colleagues that are here with us today, my sister and I decided not to go down the legal path. I'm an IT guy, and she runs a oral surgery practice. So if you, all the attorneys here, if you have a case, one of your clients gets shot, their face is all blown to pieces, my brother-in-law would be happy to take care of them. For me, as an IT professional, the AV is provided by Axion's Red 2. We're down the road. My colleague over here, Scott Hibbert, that's what we do, and all IT. So I'd like to say a couple stories. So my other names are also DJ Jimmy C, and I happen to see some of my old DJ crew here in the house. Powerhouse! So a couple things. I want to take it back from the beginning. So we were fortunate enough to grow up with an awesome man and father, and the story is that behind a man is always a good woman. My mother is an awesome soul, right? And so we would not be here today if it wasn't for my mom behind the scenes, making sure that my dad and the family had everything we needed to be prosperous and survive. Today, we had a warm-cooked breakfast, we had lunch, we had dinner, and the thing is, back in the old days, nobody asked you what you want for dinner. Mom made dinner, and we sat at the table until food was finished, right? All this with you young generation asking your kids what you want for dinner. Come on, you sit down and you eat. And if you don't eat, my mom would say, you better finish your plate or I'll shove it down your throat. So that's the way we grew up. And the thing is, and so that was us. And somehow they decided to find Scotch Plains, New Jersey to settle down. They couldn't have found a better place to settle down. I mean, it was just an awesome town. We had great friends. We had great colleagues, great school. It was an awesome place to grow up. And we were the first African Americans to move into a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. And it's interesting because we started off that way, and my dad at the nursing home somehow thought he was Jewish. So he would actually, so the nursing home he ended up with was named Aviva. It was in Sarasota, Florida. Many years ago, it was specifically for the Jewish community. And over the years, they decided to open it up to anyone. We wanted the best for my dad, so we found this location. They accepted him, they loved him, and Rabbi would come in on Sundays and give a sermon or speech, or I apologize, whatever the proper terminology is. And I remember seeing my dad on a Monday, and we'd say, "Oh, the sermon was outstanding. The Rabbi XYZ was so moving." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great, Dad, but you know we're not Jewish, right?" Like, it's all good. And so my dad was the type of person that would always welcome everybody. It didn't matter whether you were black, white, Asian, Jewish, non-Jewish. It didn't matter. If you were a good person, my dad would welcome you. He was an open person, he was an honorable person, and he was the best dad a person could ask for. And for me, growing up as a kid, my sister and I, we didn't really have to worry about anything. Dad provided, Mom was there, and another story is that when Dad had a business meeting or he had to go away for a conference, my mom, sister, and I would be excited because we'd go down to a place, I forget the name, and have hot dogs for dinner. And we were so excited to have hot dogs with raw onions. It was our outstanding experience, just like going to White Castle. Some people may think that's not awesome, but again, Mom cooked, so we always had a home-cooked meal. So when Dad wasn't there, White Castle, hot dogs, it was all good. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but one thing I'd like to leave you with is that the other great thing about my dad, if you didn't realize what an awesome person he was, he would tell you. And if you needed evidence, he had many facts based on his awesomeness. And if you ever went to any of his houses across so many of them, Scotch Plains, Martha's Vineyard, Florida, he had offices that had all his plaques and all the things all over. And I have to give credit to Porzio, specifically Vito, wherever he is. They kept his office intact. I mean, we went to his office to clean it out when he passed, and there were so many things that, pictures of his grandkids, pictures of everyone in the office, and they left the office intact. And it was difficult for us to go there to look through things and figure out what do we want to keep and what do we want to donate to the library, because Porzio actually named the law library after him, which we happen to see also. Where's Vito in here? Vito in the house, all right. So Vito, I'm sure, has a lot of stories he's going to tell. He is actually our keynote speaker for tonight. But I just want to say thank you to Vito and Porzio for all they've done. Renee, that's somewhere out here organizing the tables. I don't know where Renee is, somewhere. Not Renee Rao. What's up, Renee Rao? My White House Station friends over there. But for organizing things tonight. So I hope you all will raise a glass and celebrate to a man that actually didn't drink, but we can still raise a glass to him. Cheers to my dad. Michelle?
So I don't know, what do you guys think? I think he leaves tech and he does stand-up comedy. I'm thinking Comedy Central or something would be pretty cool. You're good. You're really good. So Chief Justice Rabner, I don't know how you're going to follow this, but I'm really excited to have the Chief Justice come on up and share some words, because obviously the Chief Justice and Justice Coleman have spent great time together, built a great relationship, two very amazing, remarkable, impactful human beings who have transformed the lives of many across the state of New Jersey with their great work. Chief Justice, let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. And I want to thank the Justice and the Coleman family especially for extending this honor and inviting me to speak this evening. In 2017, Justice James H. Coleman Jr. sat down with Rutgers University for the first of 10 interviews that he gave about his remarkable life. He began the session with a pair of quotes. The first was from the 19th century poet, Josiah Gilbert Holland. Heaven is not reached at a single round, but we build the ladder by which we rise from the lowly earth to the vaulted skies, and we mount to its summit, round by round. Next was a quote from Booker T. Washington, who wrote in his 1901 autobiography, Up from Slavery, "Success is to be measured not so much by the position one has reached in life, as by the obstacles one has overcome while trying to succeed." The obstacles Justice Coleman overcame as he climbed the ladder on his groundbreaking journey to a seat on the state Supreme Court are well known to all of us here today. Born in segregated Georgia during the Great Depression, delivered on the kitchen table by his grandmother, who had been born a slave. His father, a sharecropper, could not read or write. His mother read at a first-grade level. He grew up at a time when our education system, like the rest of the country, was separate and unequal for people of color. Black students rarely continued their education beyond the 7th grade. Yet none of those obstacles dampened the spirit of James H. Coleman Jr. I looked at the opportunity in every difficulty, he would say, rather than the difficulty in every opportunity. As a young man, Justice Coleman showed up for high school looking, as he put it, professional bound. His next step on the ladder was a law degree from Howard University, because that was where Justice Thurgood Marshall got his degree. And from there, he climbed each level of New Jersey's judicial system. The first workers' compensation judge of color, the first appellate judge of color, and the first state Supreme Court justice of color. Of his nomination to the Supreme Court, he said, quote, "What better reward, short of heaven, can there be?" But the point for Justice Coleman was not simply to chart a new path. Instead, he summoned his life experience to bring change to our justice system and to create a path for those who followed. Always one with a sharp turn of phrase, Justice Coleman said, "I wanted to do more than to be able to say that Kilroy was here. I was interested in being able to look back and ask, what contributions did I make?" Let's talk about just a few of those contributions to New Jersey's justice system. During 39 years as a judge, he authored more than 2,000 opinions on every conceivable subject. Among his most influential ones were decisions to remove discrimination in our courts and our system of justice. As an appellate judge, Justice Coleman authored the opinion in State versus Gilmore that addressed how the systematic exclusion of people of color as potential jurors violated a defendant's right to a fair trial by a jury that was impartial. He authored the Supreme Court decision in State versus Cromedy that called on the court system to recognize the unreliability in cross-racial eyewitness identifications. And in Community Realty Management versus Harris, Justice Coleman channeled his experience both as a student of the law and a child of poverty when he authored a decision that protected a woman from being evicted because she was unable to pay excessive fees and expenses that were added to her monthly rent. None of us would dispute that individuals who struggle with discrimination, with poverty, are entitled to justice and equal treatment under the law. They also benefit from voices that understand the obstacles they face. For decades, Justice Coleman was that voice. At the start of his oral history, the justice described the story as his story, that as, quote, the recollections of a poor boy who became a soldier in the judicial army to fight hate, to teach tolerance, and to seek justice for all people. These are his beautiful words. I wanted to be able to do things that would help to make America better than the America in which I had grown up. I'd always believed there was meaning to what's inscribed on the Statue of Liberty. You know, extending a hand to the poor, to the weak, to the foreign person, to come to America and be part of the American dream. I wanted part of that dream, but in a different way, not to make money, but to try to be of service to mankind. And that was the motivation that kept me moving forward. His words and his actions motivated countless others to move forward. And we are forever grateful for all that he has done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I love the way you said a soldier in the judicial army. That's everything. And, you know, as you were sharing your remarks, I was reflecting, and I know I have some co-clerks out there thinking about the really heated discussions and debates we used to have in chambers as he thought through some of those decisions in some of those very delicate matters. And I love soldier in the judicial army. That's it. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. So now I'd like to actually give us a moment to participate in a musical selection by Robin Gordon Cartier. And then, because my co-clerks and somebody knows my husband are up next, I'm gonna actually introduce them so that I don't have to get up 2 more times. So we're gonna have Robin do a musical selection. Then I'm going to invite my beloved husband from the Love Boat, U.S. District Court Judge Michael Shipp, up to share some reflections, and then my dear friend, colleague, and co-clerk, Sharice Carney-Nunez. So Robin, are you ready to do this? All right, let's go. Let's give her a round of applause.
Today we gather to honor and celebrate the life of Justice James H. Coleman, or as those of us who clerk for him call him simply, the Justice. I had the tremendous honor of serving as a law clerk for Justice Coleman during his first year on the New Jersey Supreme Court in the 1994-95 term. It's so hard to believe that that's been 30 years ago, 3 decades. And I had the benefit of being in chambers when he actually received the call from then Governor Whitman. In fact, I think she caught him off guard because she called him on his private line. And he wasn't used to business calls coming in on that line, so he picked up the call in a more casual way than normal and simply just said, hello. And she said, hi, Jim, it's Christie. And he said, who? Christie. Whitman, the governor? And then he immediately resumed his statesman-like manner. But I caught him and I saw it, so. I speak to you today representing the Justice's many law clerks who served with him over the years on the various courts on which he served with distinction. At this time, if you would indulge me, I'm going to ask if all of the law clerks in the audience could please rise to be acknowledged. Could you please join me in a round of applause? The judge-law clerk relationship is such a special connection. In fact, there are few relationships as significant or as cherished by a lawyer in their professional lives. Having been a judge myself now for over 17 years and having had my own law clerks, I can also tell you that the relationship goes both ways. And as much as the law clerk looks to the judge for guidance and direction, the judge relies on the good judgment and the thorough work product and the research skills of the law clerk. And it's a position of trust and a position of great confidence. Justice Coleman was a trailblazer. He broke barriers and shattered ceilings throughout his remarkable career, leaving an indelible mark on the lives he touched and the legal landscape of our state. He was a man of immense intellect, integrity, and dedication. His tenure on each of the courts he served was marked by his unwavering dedication to justice and equality, his keen legal mind, and his compassionate heart. His opinions and rulings reflected a deep understanding of the law and his commitment to protecting the rights of all individuals, regardless of race, creed, or background. In a world that often feels divided, Justice Coleman exemplified the power of empathy, fairness, and dedication. He taught us that true greatness lies in serving others and standing up for what is right and in leaving a legacy of positivity. Justice Coleman's legacy extends far beyond his judicial decisions. Throughout his career, he was a mentor to countless young lawyers and judges, always a source of inspiration. His pioneering spirit and his steadfast commitment to justice paved the way for future generations, ensuring that the doors that he opened would never again be closed. Beyond his professional accomplishments, Justice Coleman was a devoted husband, father, and friend. He was a man of humility and kindness whose love for his family and community was evident in everything that he did. His life was a testament to the power of perseverance, integrity, and fairness. For me, what distinguished him was not merely his professional achievements, but it was his ability to be a mentor in the truest sense of the word. Someone who leads by example, who listens with patience, and who offers guidance with humility and insight. In every conversation with Justice Coleman, he had a way of making you feel heard and valued. His advice was always thoughtful and grounded in experience and tailored to your exact circumstances. He challenged all of us to think critically, to act ethically, and to strive for excellence in all endeavors. His mentorship went well beyond the courtroom, and it touched every aspect of life, always encouraging us to balance our professional success with our personal fulfillment. He was a source of unwavering support and encouragement. He believed in me during times when I was unsure, and he pushed me to achieve more than I ever thought possible. His faith in my potential was a driving force in my journey, and his wisdom was a guiding light. I think back on some of our conversations, whether it was about my Senate Judiciary hearing, an investiture, or simply conversations that we would have when we would go out for holiday dinners. He was always a steady and calming force, and always had the right answers. Friends, it is a sobering moment when we look out into the world and our parents and those who we have looked upon for guidance are no longer with us. It reminds us that the torch has been passed on to us, and also it reminds us of our own mortality. You know, at funerals, you will often see the date that a person was born, and then a little dash, and then the date that the person passed away. That little dash represents an entire life. In Justice Coleman's case, that dash represents the caring husband, father, grandfather that he was to his family. That little dash sums up his 40 years of service as a workers' compensation judge, a superior court judge, an appellate division judge, and then ultimately as an associate justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court. That dash represents 91 years that he lived on this planet, making a positive impact on all of our lives. Friends, that dash is life, and it comes at us quickly. So here's the question. What will your dash say? Will it be and say what the justices have said, that you broke societal barriers, that you shattered professional ceilings, that you touched the lives of many and inspired generations? So many of us wake up one morning long after the opportunity to live, to love, and to enjoy life has passed us, and then we spend the remaining years chasing life. The statistics tell us that most of us will not get 91 years. No matter how long you're on this earth, life comes at us quickly, and the most precious moments are fleeting. Make the most of them. I know the justice did. As I look around this room and I see all the beautiful faces and lives that he touched, I can smile because a little of him lives on in each of us. And I know that our lives are richer for having known him. As for me, pardon me if I appear a bit bolder with my judicial philosophy, if there appears to be a renewed clarity in my decisions. In fact, I already feel a new pep in my step. You see, I have a new guardian angel, and he's the justice. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sharice Carney Nunez, and I clerked for Justice Coleman during the 1992-93 term. So I was one of the last appellate division clerks. I'm so happy to be here. I'm right off of the train from DC, and I'm just so happy to be here. So like so many others, Justice Coleman had an indelible impact on my life. There are so many memories, swearing me in as a young attorney, my wedding day, our annual Martha's Vineyard breakfast, sometimes at Linda Jean's, sometimes I got the home-cooked meal. Thank you so much. One year at breakfast, I told him about my daughter's bike. Bikes were a really big thing on the vineyard for a kid, and hers wasn't working. My husband, he's really good at fixing things, but I don't know why he couldn't fix the bike. But Justice Coleman insisted that I go get my daughter and the bike, and so I brought them back, and I know he had so many other things to do, gardening, he had beautiful gardens on the vineyard. Tennis, of course, we all know how much he played tennis. legal work. He had a whole law library up there. This is before the electronic, access, but he had the full set of, how do you get a whole law library at the vineyard? But he took the time with us. But I wanted to tell this story because it's not a legal story. He took the time with us. He pulled out his tools and he fixed it. And so even to this day, when I talk about my judge to my daughter, she just says, "Oh, the one that fixed my bike." Yes, that one, because people do remember the little things. They say a lot about who we are, and it says a lot about who he was. So speaking of the little things, those of us who clerked for justice remember that we often found him in his chambers, reading our memos, as Michelle said, arguing with us, drafting his opinions. He was always there behind the closed door when you would come in, but he was there, protected from our cologne, our perfume, any strange, smelly new lotion we might have inadvertently put on. But we always found him wearing these shoes. And oh my gosh, here they are, the shoes. Those old, beat up, worn out, holy, and I know we had a prayer, but I don't mean it in the biblical sense. I mean holy shoes. But they were famous or infamous, depending on your perspective. But I wrote a poem about his shoes, and we think that he wanted me to share it this evening, and so I will share it right now. I see you, Carol Corbin Walker. I wrote this poem in 2000, I think, when the Garden State Bar honored Justice Coleman. So here it is. He has walked miles in those shoes, though they're tattered and frayed. Their souls carried his such a very long way. From the dark days of past, where he humbly began, with those shoes on his feet and a light in his hands. Through the long days of toiling, our burdens to bear, for segregationists past wasn't no crystal stair. Still, those shoes brought him here in the peak of his prime, toiling justice and temperance and holding the line. For we waited and waited, thought he'd never arrive. How could a state so enlightened be so slow to oblige what we've all known forever, where the journey would lead with those shoes on his feet as he's planting the seeds of history's memoirs of our great pioneers and original thinkers, bravely judging with no fear. So, those shoes may be worn now. On them, he still firmly stands. And on this day, we honor the justice, the man. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Cherise. That's beautiful. So now I'd like to invite up, well, let me back up and say this. Governor Whitman sends her regrets. She was going to be here with us tonight, but she is ill and under the weather. So she sends her deepest regrets and love to the family. And we would like to actually invite former Justice Peter Venero to come on up and say a few words, because he also, like Chief Justice, had the opportunity to work very closely with Justice Coleman. And then following Justice Venero, we're going to have a video tribute from Chief Justice Deborah Porras. So, Justice, you want to come on up? Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. How are you? Good. You look great.
Thank you very much. As some of you might have noted, when Chief Justice began to speak, it had my name under his picture. And however brief a moment, I never looked so fit and trim. So I asked the videographer, please do not edit this tape. As you heard, Governor Whitman cannot be here tonight. She called me earlier today. She's actually doing fine. She was exposed to someone recently to COVID, and she did not want to risk spreading that to all of us. So she asked if I could speak a few words on her behalf, and I am so very privileged to do so. It was no secret that there would be a vacancy on the New Jersey Supreme Court shortly after Christy Whitman was elected governor. Justice Clifford was set to reach the mandatory retirement age, and Governor Whitman knew that within only a few months from taking office, in January 1994, she would need to begin the vetting process related to one of the most consequential duties of any governor, that of nominating someone to our state's highest court. So the search was on almost from the day she was inaugurated. And happily, one person fairly quickly emerged as the right person at the right time for the right position. Then Appellate Division Judge James H. Coleman Jr. Justice Coleman himself described the vetting process in his autobiography. He wrote, quote, I later found out that when considering me for the Supreme Court, Governor Whitman, her aide Peter Venero, and his staff not only reviewed my resume, but every one of my published and unpublished opinions. Let me read that again. Every one of my published and unpublished opinions. You can do the math. Jim Coleman served on every level of the judiciary, including many years on the appellate division, where he wrote literally hundreds and hundreds of opinions. Personally, I would have been fine if he had written fewer opinions, and it would not have hurt his chances any. But reviewing those opinions, and I say this very seriously, reviewing those opinions and getting to know Jim Coleman, the jurist, and better still, getting to know Jim Coleman, the person, was an absolute joy, an absolute joy. And one aspect of the vetting process that Jim did not capture in his book was shortly after the governor's office had sent him the judicial questionnaire, and those of you who are judges know this process. You get a judicial questionnaire from the governor's office. About a week or so after we sent him that questionnaire, I'm at home, it's after dinner, it's somewhat late in the evening, in my not too easy to find house in Western New Jersey, 30 years ago, when there wasn't a lot of GPS or sophisticated guidance systems. I get a knock on my door. And I wasn't expecting anyone. I had no scheduled appointments. And I open the door, and there is this beautifully dressed person, this lovely person, whom I had never met. And he extends his hand, and he says, hello, I'm Jim Coleman. And I'm kind of thinking a little bit about this. It's like, the Jim Coleman, James Coleman, Senior Appellate Division Judge, James Coleman. And he explained to me, and this is going back 30 years, so my recollection is not crystal clear, but he said words to the effect, I so respect this process, and I'm so honored by it. I wanted to return this packet to you personally. And that packet was his completed judicial questionnaire. He had me at hello. And in that questionnaire was a snapshot of the beautiful story, the historic story of the person, and up to that point, the judge of Jim Coleman. And based on that story and based on that history, he had a body of work that was second to none. And he himself, in his biography, described that body of work in words that I cannot improve on, so bear with me, let me just read it to you briefly. These are his words. Throughout my judicial career, though they tried, journalists had a tough time labeling my political leanings based on my judicial record. My body of appellate rulings defied superficial characterizations of liberal, moderate, or conservative, which apparently was a dilemma for any reporter or critic who wished to cast me as such. I believe that one of the functions of an appellate jurist is to provide stability in the law without stagnation. What an elegant phrase. Stability in the law without stagnation. Based on that record, based on those opinions, and based on what she had gotten to know about Jim Coleman, the person, there was little doubt in Governor Whitman's mind that Jim Coleman was a towering leader of the law even before his service on the Supreme Court. The interview process with the governor, such that it was, also was a joy. She turned to me after the interview and she said, "This is a very easy choice." At the time of the nomination, this is what she said, quote, "When we started with this process, we were looking for an individual who could bring the highest qualifications, background, intelligence, and integrity to the bench. I believe we have found that person." And indeed, she had. In the foreword to Jim's autobiography, Governor Whitman later said, and this is also a quote, "One of the greatest responsibilities of Governor of New Jersey is the appointment of Supreme Court justices. I was fortunate during my tenure to have appointed several, none more qualified than James Coleman. The fact that he was the first African-American justice to be appointed was secondary to his abilities. His story is the American one. Raised in a house with no electricity or running water, with an abusive father, and in the Jim Crow South, his road was not an easy one. The path was not always straight, but it stands as testament to his drive, determination, and hard work and commitment to justice that he succeeded as he did. That he was able to find the best, even in the worst of circumstances, says a great deal about Jim Coleman." In today's call, the governor added how she misses Jim. She misses the luncheons they would sometimes have when they both were retired for public office. Luncheons that Jim would organize and where the conversations focused on family and on the high-minded topics of the day. She often wonders what Jim's take on today's issues would be if those conversations were had today. And Governor Whitman says she also misses Jim's tennis game, which apparently was quite exceptional, like much of everything else that this wonderful, beautiful person did. Let me close by stating the obvious. Jim Coleman was a person of strong intellect and an unshakable sense of fairness and unyielding integrity. Those qualities, plus his unparalleled judicial experience, made him an instant leader on the Supreme Court. Justice Coleman understood the historic and inspiring nature of his appointment, but he never acted as if he were a giant of the law, which he most surely was. Instead, he was down to earth, a mentor to his law clerks, and a role model for the rest of us. Reverend Howard said it well. He was our North Star. Governor Whitman will miss him greatly,
we're missing greatly. The New Jersey judiciary has lost one of its treasures. Thank you.
I will tell you today a story about a remarkable man, a man who was my friend, and that first is the way I think of him. And he was my colleague. We worked together and we learned together. I was at a meeting in Washington, D.C., and left early to get back to New Jersey for the swearing in of James H. Coleman Jr. as an Associate Justice on the New Jersey Supreme Court, the first African American to serve in that position. It was in December 1994. I was late by a few minutes and sat at the back of the room where I heard James Coleman's acceptance speech with other guests, many of whom, like me, did not know him, but knew of him. He was the man who I later called my friend, but I found out who he was when he gave that speech. He was funny, sometimes in a self-deprecating way. Being humorous, he said, stemmed from being nervous. And then he went on to unveil, on the stage, his old and worn shoes, a symbol of what it took to get to the pinnacle of his profession. Funny, self-deprecating, yes, but also a statement of pride. He made it, and he knew he had it. From rags to riches, he said, and laughing, I still have the rags. Shoes notwithstanding, he always dressed impeccably. He somehow knew how to look his success. My husband envied that ability. When Governor Whitman nominated him, the public learned his story about growing up in poverty in a still segregated South, about his education in a segregated school with no electricity, no running water, about the teacher who saw in him a thirst to learn and to do better. At his swearing in, we learned about his pride, his ability to laugh at himself and at others, and we learned about his vision of the law. A judge, he said, must seek stability without stagnation, for the law is always changing and must be responsive to the needs of the time. Judges, he said, must have common sense and an understanding heart, must do justice in each case while recognizing precedent and continuity. He understood the Constitution as a living document. When James Coleman came to New Jersey, he had a brother here. He worked in Atlantic City during the summer. Even there, he was given menial jobs because he was Black. And later, when he had a law degree from Howard University, he could not find a law firm that would hire him for his first clerkship apprentice year required for admission to the bar in New Jersey then. What would people say if we hire a Black man, they said. Until finally, through the NAACP, he found a willing lawyer. Yet he never lost his belief in his own worth, and he fought through with quiet dignity to his goal. Later, James Coleman bought a house in Martha's Vineyard, and even later, when he served on the Supreme Court, we became friends. Many of you here today know that Martha's Vineyard is a haven for African Americans that was built over the last century, a place where African Americans feel at home, feel welcome, and can always be who they are without censure or disdain. My family, too, had a home on Martha's Vineyard, and we saw Jim and his family over the years we both served on the Supreme Court and for some years after. Those were the years of our friendship, and I treasure them. There is a last story. I must tell you it on this day of tribute. One day, I was sitting in the Supreme Court conference room by myself, waiting for the other justices to arrive, and Jim walked in, early and alone. There was a case involving racial profiling on our docket that day, and Jim said, "You need me. The court needs me here today." And then he said, "You do not know what it feels like to drive while black, or to be served in a restaurant by a waiter who lets you know you should not be sitting there at all. And you need to know."
Justice Poritz for those remarks. Sorry about that. So now, as we wind down the evening, I'd like to actually invite Vito Gagliardi up. So after the justice stepped down from the bench, retired from the bench, many of you know he went and worked at Porzio Bromberg as a partner. And I remember talking to him when he made that transition and he was settling in. And he talked about how awkward it was to make the transition, but that how the partners and the lawyers at the firm were so welcoming and kind to him that it was very easy to feel like he was at home. So Vito, thank you so much for being a great partner to the justice. Why don't you come on up and give us a few reflections?
Thank you very much. To distinguished guests and members of the Coleman family, members of the Porzio family, and the friends of Justice Coleman and all that he stood for. I am proud to be the managing partner of the Porzio firm, and I was honored and humbled to learn that Justice Coleman's written instructions for this service, and there were a lot of them, included his desire that I be one of your speakers this evening. Now, while Justice Coleman left behind a written legacy and brilliant opinions that will guide the law for generations, it is his powerful but unwritten legacy that we celebrate today. As he spent nearly a third of his professional life at the Porzio firm, I will focus on that part of his legacy with a few stories I know he loved and a few I am guessing it would be okay to tell. So I told this initial story for the first time when we dedicated our firm's library in his honor, and I know he liked it because he asked me to write it in the afterword of his autobiography. So this story involves my son, my younger son, Gregory. So my sons went to Union Catholic in Scotch Plains, and so he would occasionally ask how they were doing. And when my younger son got to high school, he was playing basketball. So when Justice Coleman asked me how he was doing, I said, well, it's a little awkward for him right now because his group, the guys he hangs with, is the basketball team. And most of the guys on the basketball team don't look like him. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. So he said, wow. He said, I need you to do me a favor. I said, sure. He said, I need you to set up a lunch for the three of us. Could you do that? So I said, sure. So, I went home for dinner that night and told my son, guess what we're going to do the next time you have a chance? So the three of us had lunch on two occasions. And, if I had a videographer or court reporter, it would have been incredible. Because the essence of the lunch was Justice Coleman giving his insights about what it's like to try to get along with people who are different than you. It was remarkable. I can't even give you the essence of it, but one of the things that stuck in my mind, and I think for those of us who knew Justice Coleman, it will resonate immediately, was to maintain a positive and cheerful disposition. To try to be friendly if you're going to encourage people to be friendly back to you, to do your best to get along with people, even if they're different. They will see in you something that they want to enjoy as a friend. So it was with great pride that 3 years later I sent Justice Coleman a picture. Now, one of the things I want you to understand about my son is he loved the game of basketball. Luckily for him, he was taller than I was, but not particularly tall. But what he lacked in height, he made up for in being somewhat slow. But he loved the game, he worked hard at it, and he developed these relationships with his teammates to the point where even though he wasn't a starter, in his senior year he was elected a co-captain. And so the picture that I sent Justice Coleman was a picture of two seniors, one black, one white. The white one was my son. And I just sent it to him because the picture spoke volumes about what my son, with Justice Coleman's encouragement and his own efforts to build relationships with his teammates, to be a positive teammate, to work hard, to make friends, to contribute any way you can, what it led to. Justice Coleman's reaction to that picture was the following. He asked me to do him another favor, which was to take him to a game. So listen, for those of you who are parents of high school athletes, if you want to talk about a power move for a kid who's not starting, the parents bring a Supreme Court justice to the game. I mean, somehow Gregory played a lot that game. Another shorter story, another one I know he liked because this is a story he told himself. So a few folks have mentioned that Justice Coleman liked to garden, so this story involves him gardening at home one day, wearing some exceedingly old clothes. I know he was fond of those. And there's a delivery. And the delivery man mistakes Justice Coleman for the hired help and says on this particularly warm day, "I can't believe they have you out here working in this heat." And his response was, "That's okay, I get to sleep with the lady of the house." All righty then. I will move on to two stories that I did not clear with Justice Coleman, but I'm confident he would find them acceptable on this occasion. A little less scandalous than that last one. So one story, also quite short, involves a phone call he placed to me in late March of 2020. So this is just after the COVID emergency hits the country and everything is shut down. So he called me, and we covered essentially three topics. First, I had taken over a few years earlier as the managing partner, so he called to express his concern for me in terms of dealing with this unprecedented situation as someone running a business, in this case a law firm. He discussed his concerns for the firm and wanted to know how I thought the people at the firm were doing at this time. And then he made this offer. And he didn't know, by the way, that the partners at the firm had already discussed the idea that we weren't going to lay anyone off, no one was going to miss a paycheck, no one was going to miss a job. We had made that decision but hadn't discussed it with members of the firm yet. And so he said, "You know, I've been thinking. Life's been good to me. I'm doing fine. If it's going to help the firm to stop paying me, I'd like you to do that because it would break my heart to know that there would be a young person who might miss a paycheck or lose a job while you were paying me." I assured him that wasn't going to be necessary, and that if it was, I would miss a paycheck before he did. But it was remarkable to me that with all that was going on in the world at the time, he took the opportunity to make that phone call and to offer to help someone that he didn't know rather than enjoy the benefit of a paycheck himself. The last story I have for you involved events of only a few months earlier. That is, it's February of 2020, and so the virus hasn't hit yet. Each year at Porzio, we celebrate Black History Month with a guest speaker and a lunch, but on this occasion, we turn the event over to Justice Coleman, whose autobiography, which you've heard about several times this evening, had just been published. The event really turned into a celebration of his life, as I think tonight should be, and he spoke about different parts of the book. When he talked about the young James Coleman growing up in the segregated South of his youth, he began to weep. And I don't mean tears in his eyes. I mean weeping in the sense that he couldn't speak for about a minute. Now, the room was full with over 100 people, and they watched in silence. I was standing because I was emceeing the event, so I put my hand on his shoulder. He smiled and then eventually was able to continue apologizing like the gentleman he was. You know, as much as he spoke and wrote about his life, in my mind, those tears communicated more to his audience about what segregation and discrimination can do to someone. He taught everyone there about what he endured, what he overcame, and he later told me that he got through those comments because he felt all the love in the room. And I am certain that he would be feeling that same love were he here tonight. I know that one of Justice Coleman's heroes was Jackie Robinson. Rightly so, two historic trailblazers. Jackie Robinson said, "A life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives." With that thought, let us remember the Honorable James H. Coleman Jr., not simply as an important man, but as a man who lived an important life. Yes, he helped develop the law in his adopted home state of New Jersey, but he also had a great impact on all of those who were blessed to know him. He turned a world stacked against him with poverty and discrimination into a world where he could succeed and have a positive impact on all those around him. And he lived a life that was, to family, to friends, and others of New Jersey, important. May God bless his memory and all of us who miss him.
Vito just did my closing. That was awesome. Thank you so much. That was really heartfelt and really, I mean, you captured the essence of everything we've talked about this evening. So Vito, seriously, thank you for that. As I was sitting here tonight listening to everyone, Sharice, I don't know if you noticed me scribbling on a piece of paper next to you. You're probably going, what the heck is she writing? I was actually just trying to capture, as we close out the official program, some of the things that we heard consistently tonight that I just want to leave you with as you walk away and think about the way you honor the legacy of Justice Coleman, the justice, as you alluded to, hubby. A couple things that's really stuck out to me that I think I want you all to just take away, right? Barrier breaker, towering leader of the law, giant of the law, soldier in judicial arms. That was beautiful. Steady and calming force, humble, kind, loving, disciplined, always acting with the utmost integrity, determined, welcome and inclusive to all, empathetic, fair, dedicated, patient, and humble. I think Chief Justice Porritt said, exceptional. Someone said, our North Star. And I think, Vito, when you ended it perfectly with your wrap-up, you talked about the impact, and the impact that the justice has had is great. I mean, it's so big. Like I used to say to my sons, I love you to the moon and back. His impact literally listening to all of you this evening to the moon and back, like to infinity and beyond. Funny, selfless, and the consummate gentleman. So I don't have a glass, but I would just say, let's all give a cheers and a rounding standing ovation to Justice Coleman. And Mrs. Coleman, I love that story Vito told about what he said to the girl. So now I'd actually like to welcome Kayron up here with me. Kayron would like to present just a token of the family's gratitude to the speakers this evening. So we have, let's see, she's going to pass them out. Vito, some flowers, Charisse. You making your way around? You want to go to Chief Just, let's see. I'm watching you. What, Michael? Michael. And we have Chief Justice Rabner is all the way around there. Chief Justice, you want to come on around? And Peter Venero, Justice Venero, come on over. She's got some beautiful, beautiful flowers for you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Justice. So with that, anyone else? You're good? Okay. With that, we would just like to close out the official part of the program and allow you all to continue to socialize, enjoy each other and the company. And I just ask you to please continue to honor the legacy of Justice Coleman as we move forward. God bless all of you and have a great night.